Okay, so we're going to talk first about sitting in a chair. And actually the principle I want to share with you about sitting applies to sitting in a chair, sitting on the ground, however you sit. And it's basically a physical alignment tool that helps your spine be upright without a whole lot of effort. So even if you're sitting in a chair, you might find that you can sit more easily. It may be counterintuitive, but you might find that you sit more easily not leaning back into the chair. Now, if you have a bad back and you absolutely need to use the chair back to sit, that's fine. But chairs are not generally designed for great posture. So I never sit with my back against the back of the chair. I sit toward the front of the chair. And you can see I also have all these various little props helping me to sit. The reason is that if you sit and your tailbone goes straight down, it's kind of tucked under. And then your spine is going to be rounded naturally. So I'm going to just turn sideways here and demonstrate. So if I'm just sitting on the chair like this, already I feel my abs engaging. And if I don't, this is what happens. Automatically, this is how my body wants to be in this chair if I'm not putting effort forth. And a lot of people find that they want to sit on a chair because sitting on the ground is too much effort for the muscles in their back. It's a lot of work to hold your spine up. It's a lot of weight. So one of the things that I teach in a yoga class when we generally sit on the floor, or if we're sitting in a chair, is that you want to just slightly lift your buttocks. Just slightly. So if you practice yoga, you may have heard a teacher ask you to pull the flesh of your buttocks back behind your sit bones. It's a similar principle. We're trying to ground the buttocks, but we're also tilting the tailbone slightly back. And the reason for this is that if you're standing and your spine is the way it's designed to be, you have a curve in your back here. It's the lumbar curve. So the lower back has a little curve that goes forward, and then the mid-upper back curves back in the other direction, and that's how the spine is. If you've ever seen a skeleton in a chiropractor's office or someplace like that, it's not a straight line. So even if you're sitting in a chair and you're using the back, it's supporting you, but it's supporting you in a straight line, which is not how the spine is intended to be. So you want to sit in a way that lets your buttocks kind of flare back the way it would if you're standing. And so that's why I recommend taking a cushion or a blanket and just propping the very back of the buttocks with that. And so some of you, like me, I need a couple of props. So that's why we have blankets on the chairs for you. It's not necessarily to make it cushier or more elevated, but you can play with it and fold it over and just sit on the edge. And if we run out of blankets, I have cushions, so let me know. So you can see how that same curve is present in my back, even though I'm sitting. Normally, the sit bones go straight down. We're actually on the back half of them, and then the spine curves the other way. So basically, you want to kind of be on the front half of your sit bones. Does everybody know what I mean when I say sit bones? Those two golf ball sized bones in your buttocks that you're sitting on. So generally, if I'm in a chair, I'm in the first half of the chair. And another reason for that is, and all this applies to those of you sitting on the ground as well, if your hips are higher than your knees, that's how you know you have that curve in your spine. As soon as your knees become higher than your hips, your tailbone is tucked under, and then your spine wants to curve in a way that's not supportive of sitting upright. So particularly for people who have long legs, If you're sitting in a chair, you want to keep propping higher and higher and higher until the knees are level with or preferably lower than the hips. Does that make sense? As soon as the knees come up here, you're like this. Your tailbone's under, your back is rounded. So the same is true for those of you sitting on the ground. If you sit toward the front of your cushion, you're going to have that slant where your knees are coming down from your hips. If your hips are not that open, then when you're sitting on the ground and your legs are crossed, if the knees are up like this, higher than the hips, you have that same phenomenon. Your tailbone is tucking under, your spine is wanting to round. So you always, whether you're sitting on the ground or whether you're sitting in a chair, you always want to try to make sure that your hips are at least as high as your knees. And then there's that effortlessness that lets the belly relax forward. And then I'm not using any muscles right now to sit up straight. It's effortless. I can sit like this for hours. So another thing about sitting on the ground is that you may not want to sit cross-legged. I have a knee issue, and so I haven't sat on the ground for many years. But I used to always sit on the ground, and I almost never sat cross-legged because after like 30 minutes or so, my feet would fall asleep. And sometimes I sit like that anyway, and my feet fall asleep, and I just deal with it. But before I had knee issues, I'm going to borrow this. The way I always sat, and if you want to see, feel free to stand up. And I'm only going to do it for a second because my knee will complain if I do it longer. Is I'm going to sit the way kids like to sit. So I'm sitting on the cushion, I'm bending my knees, and I'm folding my feet back. And this way I'm also sitting on the front. And you're always guaranteed that your hips are higher than your knees. And it's really comfortable. And you can really feel solid. And you really don't have the aching in your hips. And I recommend it. But it's really a matter of comfort. Hi. So I would say experiment. If you don't have a cushion at home, like this one, then use blankets. Use pillows. It doesn't really matter much. Just let your body tell you what feels most comfortable for you, and play with it.
Can I just ask a real quick question?
Yes.
Do you think there's any chance that your knee issue developed from sitting on the floor? Because I think that's what's happening to me.
I do think so.
Yeah.
I'm like 99% sure.
Yeah.
That sitting in the way that I just showed you for hours and hours and hours and hours on end, mostly, in my home practice, the amount of time that I would sit wasn't dangerous to my knees. But going on retreat and sitting like that for maybe 10 hours a day for a month at a time, that's just hard on the knees.
Yeah.
And I confessed this weeks ago, but, I was really not skillful in my earlier years, like my earlier 8 years.
Sounds like you're just very zealous.
I was zealous, but I had a lot of ego in it, where I felt like I was just going to sit through it. And usually, actually, the knees didn't hurt while I was sitting, but when I stood up, they would kill, and that would have been a signal to tell me, okay, don't sit like that. But I was really attached to wanting to sit like that because it was such an effortless posture for me, and I really liked feeling grounded and sitting, and I always thought the people that sat in the chairs were somehow worse meditators, and I struggled for a long time to make that transition from the ground to the chair. And during that struggle, my knees got worse and worse until finally it was like, just sit in the damn chair. And I have to say I still miss sitting on the ground, but I'm totally comfortable sitting in a chair now as well. But
it's a different sensation down here, but
it is what it is. It's all about finding a posture that supports you. So if you feel like you're straining, if you're sitting on the ground, sit in a chair. If you feel like sitting in the chair makes you slouch, try not sitting at the back of the chair, or try sitting on the ground. And you might try like 5 minutes at a time and just see how it works. Okay? So everybody's in their comfortable position. Oh, one more thing. If you're sitting in a chair, there's a couple of techniques for using how do you place your legs. Most people will tell you to place your feet right under your knees. I'm not most people. Again, I think that downward slope from the hip bone to the knee is really beneficial. And so I like to take my feet a little bit forward, especially if you have long legs. Because if you have long legs, you may not even be able to get your butt high enough to create that downward slope. But if you bring your feet forward, voila, it's there. Another thing that may be comfortable is really to sit on the very edge of the chair, cross your ankles under you. You know, depends on what works for you. I just want to give you a couple of options. Okay, well, that's enough about posture. Let's close the eyes. And let's take a deep breath in through the nose, filling the body with the breath. Keep opening, keep filling. Feel the fullness, the richness of that inhale. And exhale out of the mouth. Nice. And another deep breath in through the nose. That's it. And on this exhale, just imagine all the thoughts just releasing out of your body. And one more nice deep breath in through the nose. And on this exhale, feel your whole body sink down, let go, relax. Let your hands rest comfortably in any position that feels gentle to you. See if you can relax around the jaw and the mouth. Soften around the eyes. Allow the shoulders to relax down. And feel the heaviness of your sit bones on your chair or cushion or the ground. And invite your belly to soften and relax. See if you might let go of any agenda that you might have or any idea about how this is supposed to look, feel, or work. And just start by bringing your attention either to the sounds that you hear, the breath in your body, or the physical sensations. Start with just choosing one and take a few moments or even minutes with it to help your mind rest in that object of attention. Don't go reaching out after anything. Just let awareness be present. Awareness is not complicated. It is just the knowing of sound being heard, the knowing of breath being breathed, the knowing of sensations being felt. The mind like a blank canvas, just letting that object be painted on it. And relax into whatever you're noticing. Make it effortless. So if sensations are screaming at you right now, great. It gives you something really easy to focus on. If sound is annoying you, great. Listen to the sound. Whatever is prominent in your awareness, use as your anchor for your attention to connect with it. You can stay with this anchor a while longer, or if you feel like you're ready to open the space of awareness, you can include in the sounds, the sensations, or the breath, whichever ones are not your anchor. You can open awareness to noticing any emotions, any images or memories, even noticing thoughts. The mind doesn't need to select between or among objects. It will naturally notice whatever it's drawn toward, and that's perfect. Don't have to change anything. If there's a sensation that you notice in that moment, that's your source of meditation. If you're noticing that thinking is happening, you might make a mental note to yourself, thinking. You might note it more specifically with the kind of thinking that's happening, like judging or planning or ruminating. Trying to keep awareness connected to the present sense experiences, the sensations, the feelings, sounds, even smells, whatever's happening right now, just letting the mind know that it's happening. It's as simple as that. Nothing in your awareness is a distraction from your meditation. Anything awareness touches becomes in that moment part of your meditation. You don't hold on to it and you don't push it away, and it will naturally move and change and come and go, and new things will call your attention. This is how it works. Don't need to change a thing. Be curious. So if there's restlessness or agitation, feel restlessness, feel agitation. If the mind is experiencing a sense of delight, see if you can feel that without trying to hold on to it. See if you can relax even more, body and mind. Just allow. Whatever comes, comes. The mind meets it with friendliness, acceptance, ease, compassion. So for those of you who have not been coming each week, what we're doing is we're slowly introducing each week the different objects that the mind encounters when you sit still and you're quiet. So there's the senses, the sounds, the smells. If your eyes are open, there's sight. There's the feeling of the breath and all the feelings that the body might produce, comfortable or otherwise, tightening, releasing, just the sensations of the body. Thoughts always happen. Thoughts are not one of the objects that we look to focus on or make an object of meditation, but we don't need to push them away either. We just let them come and we become aware of them and we bid them farewell if they're inclined to leave us. And pretty much all of the objects are the same way. They'll come and go and we're not looking to hold on to any of them. Like, ooh, here's the breath. My mind finally found the breath. Okay, let me stay in the breath. That's a really rigid stance to take for the mind. It's not creating ease and it's not conducive to wisdom. It's clinging. It's ultimately conducive to suffering. So there are practices where you're really training the mind just to focus on the breath, and that's a different story. We're not practicing that in this course. So this is Vipassana meditation or insight meditation, and it really embraces all the things that the mind encounters. But it's also trying to help the mind be present. And the difference between all the other things that the mind encounters and thoughts are that thoughts are not happening in the moment. Thoughts are always about something that has just happened or has happened ages ago or is about to happen. It's not a present sense experience. So that's why we don't really use the thoughts as one of the objects of meditation, but it's not like thoughts are wrong. Oh no, I'm thinking, I'm not doing it right. Thoughts are just something that happens. And when the other things happen, it's okay to rest in them until they go or something else comes that takes our attention a little bit more forcefully. Like you're sitting and you're breathing for 6 breaths and then there's a pain in the ankle and that calls your awareness to it a little bit more. And so now your awareness is of the ankle. And then you hear the sound in the background and now you're listening to the sound. And you'll stay with that. until the mind finds something else more interesting. And that's how it goes with all the objects of meditation, except thinking. Thinking, we notice and we let it go. So today we're going to cover another sort of object. It's not really an object in the way that the other things are object, because it's not tangible really. But it's really, really important. So just a very quick review for those who are new. One of the premises that this particular practice is based on is that primarily we suffer or have stress or have dissatisfaction in our minds and hearts and lives because we're wanting things to be different than they are, or we're not seeing clearly how things are. That's basically it. Anytime you're not happy with how things are, it's because you're not accepting them or you're confused about them. So we're trying to free the mind from needing to control everything. And we're trying to free the mind from its belief that we are in control, that we are this separate entity that we call self, that's not part of the big dance of life that is just flowing along with all the other entities that are alive. Because that's really the truth of reality, is that everything is nature. We're nature. We're one expression of nature. The tree is another expression of nature. And nature simply happens. And we're not in control of it. And yet we desperately want to be. And we have fear. We have fear that starts from the first breath we take. We're in this comfortable, warm womb, and then suddenly we're out into this cold, airy space, and if we were unfortunate enough to perhaps be slapped to get us to cry when we're born, that's our welcome into this world. You know, it's like going from this nice, comfortable, protected cocoon into this scary environment. Being born and being alive is scary. And the fact that things are happening all the time out of our control is scary. And so it's very natural to have fear, and it's very natural to respond to fear by wanting to control, wanting things to be the way we want them to be. I want my body to be comfortable. I want the person I have a crush on to like me. I want to get an A in my class. I want to make more money. You know, I want my neighbors not to be so noisy. I mean, there's 1,000 things that we want. We want to control our environment. So this practice is very much designed to help us meet all the things that happen within our awareness in a way that's more accepting and more friendly. So that we're practicing, by meditating, being more fluid with nature, with life, more at ease. Being more accepting means being more happy. So when you sit and you close your eyes and you quiet and you settle down, or maybe you don't quiet and maybe you don't settle down, and you know, you hear this cacophony of chatter, you know, it's all a practice to let it be okay. So because this is the intention of what we're doing, this next piece that I'm going to introduce is so important. In the tradition that I'm teaching and that I study and practice in, this piece is called Vedana. It's a Pali term. Pali is a language similar to Sanskrit, thousands of years ago in India. And there's no good translation for this. I'll tell you the translation that I'm always taught, but I don't like it. And the translation is called feeling tone. So does anybody have any idea what I mean when I say feeling tone? No. It's a stupid translation. It doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't give you any clue. So I'm just going to tell you what it is, and we don't have to come up with a better name for it. You can come up with one. Let me know if it's a good one. I'll use it next year. Feeling tone simply means the quality of something being either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Every single thing that we encounter, we experience as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neither pleasant or unpleasant. So some things are really pleasant and some things are really unpleasant. Those are the easy ones. And then there's all the shades of gray in the middle. And those are the tricky ones. Because it's harder to tell that we're reacting to the pleasantness or the unpleasantness. And neutral is really tricky too. Because we're basically sensory addicts. You know, they did a study once, they've done lots of studies on it, but there's a study where they had 3 apples, and the 3 apples were identical. They were picked from the same tree at the same time, they were all equally ripe, and they had 3 apples. And 1 apple received a lot of loving kindness. Deliberately talk to the apple, nurture the apple, say sweet things to the apple. Swear to God, this is true. Like really, like be loving to the apple. Another apple was treated badly. Literally, like bad, mean things were said to the apple. Now remember, we're all living organisms and we all interrelate. The 3rd apple was just ignored. The apple that was treated well lasted the longest without decaying. The apple that lasted the 2nd longest without decaying was the apple that was treated poorly. The apple that was ignored decayed the quickest. I'm just remembering my friend who lives in Marin County and has little boys that go to progressive elementary school. And they did this experiment with beanstalks. They made sprouts and stuff like that, and they did a similar kind of thing, and they had the same results. What a great lesson for kids. So, we tend to prefer negative attention to no attention. We tend to prefer negative stimulation to no stimulation. We're kind of wired that way. So neutral is actually a difficult place. Not a lot of things are neutral, but some things are. What was it that you said the other day was neutral? Okay. Because it's just so hard to come up with an example of something, but you might think of like the person at the checkout counter. Sometimes you notice you kind of like this person, especially if you go to the same grocery store all the time and you go and you see this person a lot and you start to have an affection for them. You may not know their name, you may never have had a conversation, but you kind of notice yourself maybe going on their line. There's something about them that you're kind of liking. Maybe there's another person at the same grocery store that for whatever reason someday gave you the wrong change, didn't give you your 5-cent bad credit, who knows. You don't like that person. There's a slight distaste for them, and you might notice that. And you might notice, and try it out for yourself, the next time you go to a grocery store or waiting in line. You might find that you have a neutral feeling toward this person. And we're going to explore this in weeks down the line once we actually start practicing in relating to people. But the thing about the neutral is that it's really hard to stay present for it. It's really hard. The mind isn't caught in something. So like, I've worked a lot with pain as my object of meditation quite easily, because my mind can very easily rest in a sensation that's powerful, even though it's not a pleasant sensation. And pleasure is also, for a lot of people, easy to stay with. And these are generalizations. Some people have a hard time with pleasant, and some people can't be present for pain or difficult. But a lot of people have difficulty with neutral. So I just want to put that out there. So it's really important for us to start to recognize in our meditation and then ultimately in our life how every single perception, every single moment, every single experience is laced with pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So close your eyes. You don't have to get comfortable, not doing anything fancy. Just close your eyes. In this moment, if you're aware of something that feels pleasant, raise your hand. Nobody's looking except me. Okay. You can take your hands down. And if you're aware of an unpleasantness, raise your hand. Okay? Hands down. If you're aware of feeling rather neutral, raise your hand. Okay. All right, you can take your hands down. So not surprisingly, the majority of you, well, the highest number was unpleasant, the second highest number was pleasant, and the third highest number was neutral. That's pretty common. So the reason why we want to be aware of this and practice it in our meditation is because most of the time, pleasant leads to wanting. Anybody not want pleasant? Not like pleasant?
Well, if we're drawn more to the negative, sometimes we get caught up and more attached.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. People tend to have a predisposition toward being caught up in, as you say, predisposed toward unpleasant, pleasant, or neutral. What their mind is more likely to notice, so to speak. Pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral exist everywhere. But if your mind is more likely to notice unpleasant, then the overall feeling tone, if I can use that expression, is going to feel unpleasant. But even if you're the kind of person who tends toward noticing or gravitating toward unpleasant, you probably still like pleasant. Most people enjoy pleasant. Most people like being comfortable. You know, like if you could have a good dream or a nightmare, which would you rather have? If you can sit in a really comfortable chair or you can sit on a bed of nails, what would you rather do? I mean, generally we prefer to be comfortable and probably spend most of our lives, some might say all of our lives, trying to be comfortable. Like literally on an unconscious level, we're preoccupied with wanting to be comfortable. And we're doing everything in our power in every moment to be comfortable. If you're sitting in meditation and you make the slightest shift in your body, why is that? You want to be comfortable. So we practice sitting in meditation, feeling the sensation and not shifting, so that we're not a slave to being comfortable. We're not addicted to being comfortable. We can be with things as they are, and therefore we can be happy, because things aren't always going to be comfortable. So generally, when things are pleasant, it creates a sense of wanting to hold on to the pleasant. When things are unpleasant, it creates a sense of wanting to push away the unpleasant or change it to make it pleasant. And when things are neutral, there's often the experience of checking out. Sometimes neutral can be perceived as unpleasant, and there's a pushing away. And sometimes neutral can be perceived as pleasant. But basically neutral is neutral. But sometimes when you really investigate neutral, as you look into it more closely, it can start to have shades of pleasant or unpleasant. But there is neutral. And neutral, is a no man's zone oftentimes. So those are the dangers. And they're not dangers in our meditation, but they're what our meditation can show us about how we're existing in the world. How many of you are aware that you're walking around in life either wanting, not wanting, or checking out all the time? Yeah. I mean, that's really what we're doing. We're either wanting, not wanting, or checking out. Checking out can be considered a reaction to not wanting. But checking out can just be, there's nothing going on here. My mind is numb. I'm blank. You have a question, Bob?
I had a strange experience last week. I was meditating, and I had an image of someone who I had very fond memories of. So the image came up, but what was strange is emotion came up. An emotion and the image, the two didn't correlate in my experience. And there was a clash. And the emotion in itself wasn't intense, but because of this contradiction, it felt very intense to me and disturbing. Mm-hmm. How could this be? Right. This is such a nice person. Why is the emotion of anger being attached to her in this little play that's going on in my head? And it was very upsetting to me, and I just couldn't understand it. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like this person did something recently. This person has been away for years and years. And, it just disturbed me because it became unpleasant over things that relatively weren't unpleasant.
Right. Yeah, that happens a lot of times. Something that we think of as pleasant will evoke an unpleasant sense. And sometimes that we think of as unpleasant might actually feel pleasant. I talked a few weeks ago about sleepiness and how we think of sleepiness as unpleasant. But that's because it's something we don't want. And so when sleepiness is arising, what generally immediately follows sleepiness is not liking sleepiness. And not liking is unpleasant. But if you can disconnect that reactivity and you can just notice sleepiness for what it is, sensations in the body, feelings in the mind, whatever, if you notice it, it might actually be pleasant. So what you're describing, Bob, is that the unpleasantness came because confusion was there. there was discord between the image of this person or the memory of this person and the anger that you were feeling. And that didn't make sense to you. And you wanted it to make sense.
The anger that she was expressing didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And that upset me.
Right. So it's good to watch that. I mean, what you're describing is really good practice. Is to see image, to see anger, to notice this doesn't make sense, to feel the upset that follows from that. And then now the upset is the object of your meditation. It's all causes and conditions that create the next thing and create the next thing and create the next thing. And the mind just simply watches it all. So that's how it works. But when you're watching, you can start to interrupt. So there's a chain of events. In Buddhism, there's this concept of dependent origination. And basically, what that means is everything is conditioned. Everything has a causality. Everything arises from something else. Conditions happen the way they happen, and then the next thing happens, and that's a new condition, and the next thing happens. So just to give you, it's going to be a little technical right now. I'm going to kind of whisk through it quickly because it's a little heady, but I do want to put it out there in terms of context of this Vedana thing that we're working with today. So the chain of dependent origination is a chain of 12 things. I'm going to talk specifically about the 5 or 6 somewhere in the middle, because that's really the crux of what we're doing here in Vipassana meditation. So it is said that consciousness arises. Consciousness just means you have a mind, basically. There is consciousness. And then because there is consciousness, there is body and mind, basically. Body and mind only exist if there's consciousness. And because there's body and mind, there are the 6 sense stores, right? And because there's the 6 sense stores, we make contact with something. So there's a sound. The sense store of ear hears the sound. So at some sense store, a contact is made with some sort of phenomena, some stimulus. And there's a perception that happens. In the perception of what is being contacted, what is being known by the senses, there is a flavor. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. From the flavor arises what we call generally craving. Craving is the word that basically means we want things to be how we want them to be. We want to bring it in or we want to push it away. So out of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, craving arises. And then out of craving comes clinging. Craving is the this, and the clinging is the this. The reaching out with an open hand, or the holding on with a tight fist. This is always suffering. Always. No matter what the objects are. This clinging is what makes us suffer. So that is the natural progression of what's going on in our body-mind all the time. So what we're doing is trying to bring consciousness to it so that we can interrupt it and not get to the clinging, not get to the suffering. Well, consciousness we can't interrupt. Body and mind We can't interrupt. The sense doors, we don't want to interrupt. We want to be able to have sense doors. Whatever comes in contact with our sense doors is not in our control. We can't do anything about that. Even perception is not really in our control. Perception is color, and it's also conditioned. How we perceive something. I won't get into that. That's a whole nother. But at the moment that pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral comes into our awareness, we then start to have a choice. We can't decide whether something is going to be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. It just is. And it's subjective. Not everybody's going to feel the same thing as pleasant or the same thing as unpleasant. But who you are and who you have become conditioned to be will like certain things, will not like certain things, or be neutral to certain things. So all of that is just how we work. We don't have to understand it. It's just how we work. But we get to the place where pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral happens, and now we're in charge. Here's where meditation gets to free you. When you notice pleasant, the natural reaction is to crave. But if you notice pleasant as pleasant, you interrupt the cycle of dependent origination. There's this idea that we talked about last week when we were talking about emotions. How you can kind of observe them without getting stuck in them. So it's kind of like your awareness is a computer screen. Is that light too bright?
A little, but I'm trying to let it go. I can turn it off, but I think people want it on.
I think we can use this.
It's fine.
I don't think it's going to go on fire. It'll be fun to see what we do if it does. She and I planned this in advance. It's all part of the big plan. So you can imagine that your awareness is like a computer screen. And all sorts of things are popping up. Pop-up ads, email from a friend that you're waiting for, a video that's funny, some bad news blurb that's just awful and toxic. There's all these things coming up on the screen. As long as you remember that you're the screen, you're just the screen. So all those things come and go. When something fun is on the computer screen is not fun. The computer screen is still a computer screen. When something nasty is on the screen, it's still the exact same screen. It's made of the same stuff. It hasn't changed. It has not been altered by what it has encountered, what has popped up on it. That's the gift of mindfulness, of awareness. Awareness is unfazed by that which it encounters. Awareness simply observes it, knows it, recognizes it. It doesn't need to interpret it. It doesn't need to change it. It doesn't need to love it or hate it. Awareness, what we all have just by sitting here right now, awareness just knows that things are. It doesn't have preferences. Our personality has preferences. Our personality is conditioned. Right? Even identical twins, separated at birth, raised apart, have different preferences. They're conditioned differently. And even the DNA that they share that makes them similar is a conditioning. It's all how things came together to make things as they are. Awareness is pure. Awareness is untouched. Does that make sense? It's a little esoteric. So, awareness hears the sound. Awareness doesn't say humming. Awareness doesn't say annoying. Awareness doesn't say, what is that? Awareness is just the ear has consciousness, the sound makes contact with the ear, and awareness knows that there is a sound. Awareness knows that the ear is hearing. Awareness knows that the breath is being breathed. Awareness is not creating the breath. Awareness is not liking the breath. The awareness is not changing the breath. It is simply that which knows. And then we start to layer things on top of it. What is it? Do I like it? Do I not like it? Do I want it? Do I not want it? Can I hold on to it? Can I push it away? And it becomes chaotic. So the more you can practice refining awareness and stripping away all the other stuff, the more everything is perfect. Because remember, awareness just knows. In the knowing, nothing is wrong. In the liking or not liking is when we start to have problems. The liking or not liking arises from pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. So, it is so important to start to begin to practice with pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral and become aware of it as part of your meditation and ultimately as part of your day-to-day living. So, just a real easy example of how, this spared me from a little suffering. So yesterday morning I woke up, I came into the studio to meditate, and my girlfriend was already in here meditating, and she burned an incense. I really don't like to breathe in smoke of any kind, and I prefer not to have incense burning, particularly when I'm meditating, but really anytime. So I walked in, and I was going to sit, and I was immediately assaulted by the smokiness in the room. And I just literally, my mind said, unpleasant. I mean, I'm in the habit of it, so it just, it's kind of natural for me at this point. My mind said unpleasant, and I could become aware of it being unpleasant, and I wasn't annoyed. I was able to take the next step, which was open the windows. And then later say, I would prefer if you didn't burn incense. It bothers my lungs. But I didn't for 1 second sit during that meditation ruminating about being annoyed by that. And knowing me, if I didn't have that tool, I would have. Because I'm one of those that gravitates toward not liking things. Yeah.
Can you maybe give an example of how to deal with somebody that is giving you pleasant or unpleasant feelings? Like a personal situation, if you're dealing with somebody and you get an automatic unpleasant feeling, what should you go about that when you have that conscience?
Yeah. So the first thing to do is to note what it feels like in your body to be feeling an unpleasantness about this interaction or this person, right? Because ultimately, the reason why it's being perceived as unpleasant is because of conditioning that's personal to you. So it's always about you. So you want to keep it about you, and when the person is saying something that you're perceiving as unpleasant, be aware of unpleasant. Use the noting. I do. You can say unpleasant to yourself. Probably don't want to say it to the person. And then if you can, give yourself the attention by feeling how unpleasant it feels. You know, remember the apples. You know, even negative attention is better than no attention, and positive attention is the best. So we always want to respond to whatever's happening within us with positive attention. And positive attention just means bringing neutral awareness. If your awareness comes to your being and feels unpleasant, without judging, without disliking, without getting caught up in story, that's a really kind act toward yourself, to bring your attention to the part of you that's feeling, I don't like this. It's kind of soothing and nurturing. So the first thing you want to do is you want to recognize unpleasant. Bless you. Yes. The second thing you can do is to feel it in your body. Another thing you might do is, depending on the situation, like we talked about last week, there might be compassion that's appropriate. If the person's really being mean to you, you might start with compassion for yourself. You might realize that this person's meanness arises out of their conditioning and their suffering. Because inherently, none of us are that way. But things have happened to us that have created conditioning that makes us do the unskillful and the unwholesome things that we do. And all of us do them. And we all have suffered. And we all still react in ways based on our suffering. And when you can realize that about yourself, you can start to recognize that in others, and you can be a little less aversive toward other people and a little more compassionate, a little more realizing, okay, I see that you're hurt here. And the other part is, don't take it personally. Because whatever they're saying is about them, and whatever you're feeling is about you. You know, we always make our hurt about the other person, and we make the other person's hurt about us. And it's just what we do. If the other person's being mean to us, we think it's about us. If we're hurt by what the other person says, we think it's about them. But it isn't. If they're being mean, it's because of their conditioning. And if you're hurt, it's because of your conditioning. And so we're all alike in that way. And it really, to remember that and to know that, really can spontaneously give rise to compassion and a nice sense of interconnectedness, which ultimately feels better to you, to feel like, okay, you're my sister, you're my brother, you're with me in this human condition. So we're going to practice a little bit with pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And all we're going to do is we're going to sit, and we're going to let everything be as it is, and we're going to use the noting. So the noting, for those of you who've missed it in past classes, is a very gentle commentary in the mind. In this particular case, the noting is really easy because you're really using only those 3 words: pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And you're not looking for anything. It could be pleasant, 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 pleasant. And then you can start to feel like, well, this isn't very helpful. If everything's pleasant, then how am I going to get practice with the unpleasant? And then you'll notice in that agitation, there's unpleasant. Voila. Okay, so let's try it out. And if you think nothing's happening, you're wrong. There's always something happening. Because even in the sense of nothing happening, there's something. Nothingness feels like something. Maybe it's neutral, maybe it's not. But there's always one of those three. Okay. So again, let's just take one deep breath and just try to let go of all the words and all the ideas. There's a lot of heady stuff. Just be in your body. Eyes closed. And you can start with your anchor again. It's always a nice way to help the mind come back into the present, back into the body. Letting whatever is here that most easily draws your attention be where you begin. And then just allowing everything else that the mind notices be noticed and be recognized as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Even if thinking is what you notice, you can notice the flavor of thinking, whether this thought feels pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Try to relax the mind. You don't have to figure it out. The mind naturally interprets pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. Just relax and let it happen.
Thank you, Susan.
How was that for you?
It was so much better in comparison to the first meditation because I would just hear the words pleasant or unpleasant in terms, and it was mostly feelings and through my posture. Whereas before I kept getting this thoughts popping in, so I felt I had, at least thought-wise, a bit more control and more focus. So that was nice.
I find a lot of amusement in it. The pleasant and unpleasant happen simultaneously from the same cause.
Yep. So what did your mind do with that?
Well, aside from being amused by it, I don't know. But, it's, I could see, chains of events, noticing whichever first, and then realizing, oh wait, there's actually a pleasant part of this as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there was like, that was like, ooh, wasn't that clever, right?
Uh-huh.
I feel confused also because when I think of situations that are unpleasant, it seems to me that I could be feeling awareness because that's appropriate, and I could feel unpleasantness in terms of sensations. Even though something should be pleasant, I'm feeling unpleasant. And it's confusing in the sense that should be the awareness and the appropriate thing if that's how I really feel. But I'm confused by that's like just a step, it's a layer that has to be uncovered to get somewhere else.
Mhm.
What is the something else? It just seems like, talking about life on Saturn or something. It's as remote
Mm-hmm.
to me as that, the feeling anything other than what I'm feeling.
Yeah. I would agree that you're confused. And I would say that the first step to helping that confusion is to get rid of the word should. Anytime you think it should feel a certain way, you're in it. Yeah, that's dukkha. That's suffering. So, and as far as like getting to the next step, for now there is no next step. It really is just sitting here, like you're watching a movie or you're looking at a photo album. Some artist took all these pictures. You go through them, you notice one, you're like, oh, I like that one. Oh, I don't really like that one. Oh, this one I don't really have an opinion about. It's just going through experience from one moment or nanosecond to the next. Aware that there's a liking or not liking or neither. And sometimes both. And it doesn't have to lead anywhere.
I see it as a next step because originally the situation was an attachment that felt
Right.
like not a choice.
Right.
And then it moved to sort of a choice. I could say, well, I don't like this.
Right.
But again, that's kind of negative.
Right.
I don't like this.
Right.
But
I don't like this, meaning this is unpleasant.
Yes.
Right. So, but can you see the difference between I don't like this and I can't be happy unless this stops?
Well, it was different than being in the attached state. I'm uncomfortable. I'm miserable.
Right.
I have no control. I'm a victim.
Right.
To I don't like this. I'm not sure what's appropriate action, but I know I don't like this, and I have some control over it,
Right.
and I have a sense of choice.
Right.
It would be wonderful if it was more neutral, but it isn't more neutral yet. May never be more neutral. It just may be, okay, I'm recognizing that I don't really like this, and I'm not going to spend too much time here.
Right. Perfect. You got it.
I find for me when I sit like that, it's more like I just feel more seated in that, like there's more of a curiosity about what's going on, rather than kind of a grasping or pushing away, more of a just kind of a curiosity.
Mhm.
I know that I noticed in my last retreat, some of the things that I'll tend to kind of push away from are things like, I don't like to be hot, so if I start feeling hot, I don't like that, so I'll just try to push it away. But if I just stay kind of in it and seated in it, and even when, when other people start to kind of move around, it's like you want to move around, and I started thinking, well, maybe I could just let other people do that for me and just stand still. So I feel like I see things with a much greater sense of curiosity rather than judgment,
Yeah.
which feels really much more playful in a sense, and also much more,
Yeah. I mean, curiosity is a great word for what we're doing. I mean, like Bob was amused. It's great to be amused. It's a great thing, like, oh, there's a sensation and it's in my thigh and it's burning. I can either respond unconsciously to the unpleasantness and grip and move or be annoyed, or I can be like, what is this sensation? What does it actually feel like? Where is it in my body? Where's the source of it? Where is it coming from? Is it in my bone? Is it in my muscle? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it pressure? And really just bring my full mindful presence to it with that playful curiosity. Like, I want to know this. You know? I want to know this thing, that's this visitor that's come. You know? Yes.
Last week, I come up to you and I was asking you at what point does the meditation lead to kind of answers?
Lead to answers, right?
Yeah, lead to answers, like tapping into your intuition or being able to have a problem and then meditate on it.
Right.
And it's funny because I think you just kind of answered my question, because even in that moment, some things that I thought were pleasant, I was like, oh, actually that is kind of unpleasant. Like, so I got some insight there, and I'm just wondering, at some point, will you show us how to use the meditation to make choices, like to discern
Right.
the right action to take?
No.
No.
No. Not to be funny, but if you meditate, you will get clarity, you will get insight, and you will know what actions to take. I can't show you that. I can give you the tools. I'll put the hammer in your hand, but I can't teach you how to hammer a nail. You know? But it will happen. You know, you will start to see things. You'll start to notice, oh, I'm reacting this way because of this. The mind will just start to be able to see the conditioning that creates the responses. And when you can see the chain of events, and you can see the causality, and you can understand it as impersonal, and you can really witness it in all of its forms with a sense of just acceptance, then there's no reactivity, and when there's no reactivity, there's clarity.
But what about making decisions for the future? Like knowing if you should or shouldn't. I understand the clarity in the moment,
Right,
but I feel like a lot of our life is planning for the future,
right,
and sometimes I just don't know what I should do.
right.
So, yeah, it's just really
Do you hear what she's saying? Sometimes she doesn't know what she should do in terms of planning for the future. So, what you're experiencing is one thing. So, when that's happening, bring awareness to the wanting. Because wanting is what's happening right now. And wanting feels a certain way in you, and I'm guessing that the wanting feels unpleasant, or you wouldn't be asking me how to make it go away. That's what's happening. There's a wanting that's present, the wanting is unpleasant, and you want to know how to make it go away. You want to be in control. You want to know the future. You want a crystal ball.
That's what meditation is.
Yeah. Meditation at best is going to free you from needing to know.
Right. I totally.
It's going to let.
Thinking. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, maybe you don't need to know that right now. Maybe you just need to be now in the present and experience what's happening now. And you know, I have this. I call it the more will be revealed plan. Right. I like have the trust in the
Right.
universe and the infinite, whatever is out there, is that, you know, maybe I'm going to be shown some things that I need to see, and maybe I'm not seeing them right now, but maybe I will.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reality is, I hate to say that we're not supposed to want this, but if we do this, it will happen anyway. But the reality is, as long as you practice with what's present, like feeling the wanting, feeling the confusion, feeling the frustration, feeling the desperation, feeling how the body gets tight around it, whatever's there that comes up around this. As long as you practice and train your mind to be present for those things that are actually happening instead of worrying about what isn't happening yet, the more that presence will create the space for the knowing that you're seeking. But if you're seeking the knowing, the seeking itself is blocking the knowing. Because what's happening now is just wanting. How could awareness penetrate wanting? Somewhere in you, you do know what you need to be fully happy and fully using your gifts. But in this moment, you're not aware of it. And in this moment, that's bugging the crap out of you. And in this moment, the amount that you're bugged is totally blocking you from realizing that truth. So the antidote is always be present to what is happening right now. If I'm angry, how does it feel in my body to be angry? What does this feel like? And you don't pay attention to what anger feels like because you need to make anger go away. But because all you can do is give it your presence. They're doing a lot of studying right now, scientists, neuroscientists and psychiatrists and all sorts of scientists are researching the mind. And one of the things that they're understanding about mindfulness and how if you, for instance, note an emotion and you just let yourself be aware of the emotion rather than getting sucked into the emotion, or note pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. Why that works is because the left brain and the right brain have different roles. And when an emotional response is going to arise in response to pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, that's a right brain function. But when your mind processes what's happening in the moment, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, it's a left brain function. And the left brain function basically prevents the right brain from running amok. And there's some integration that's taking place in the mind so that you're a whole-brained being. And then with your whole brain, you can, as Bob says, choose. What do I do now? And sometimes the only thing you can do now is to be present for the next arising. And the next arising. And the next arising. But as long as you're practicing being present to what is now, the next moment isn't ruminating about just what was. The very next second after what is now has already made now history. And so if you're spinning a story or if your emotions are being controlled by what has already happened, you're not in the present. And you are a dog on a chain. You know? Let a dog come into a room that has food in it, and that dog is like, doesn't know anything else that's going on. It's just so filled with craving that, it could, step on a piece of glass, as all of us have done. We have stepped on something and hurt ourselves because we weren't present to what was happening now, because we're so caught in our craving, in our wanting, in our not wanting. So that's why we're doing this practice, is to train the mind to be present from one moment to the next, so that every moment we are awake and every moment we are free.
If you are aware of you're not wanting and you want to be away from it, but then you don't have a choice. Let's say in a work situation, I have a co-worker that I consider a good friend, however, complain the whole day over the same issue, day in, day out, year in, year out, and I get anxiety just to go to work and just to imagine hearing her voice.
Right.
But, I can't bring myself, I know it's lack of courage of my part to say to her, I don't think it's going to change anything. But so I put my headphone on, try to not seek out, because I know I'm judging, I know I'm doing all that, and I don't want to be any part of that. I put my headphone on, she still come over and tap on my shoulder and, make me take my headphone off to listen to more of that. So what do I do?
So again, here's a situation that you're finding unpleasant, right? And you're trying all these strategies to not have to experience unpleasant. What would it be like to fully experience unpleasant?
It's been 8 years.
You're not fully experiencing unpleasant.
Okay.
You have spent 8 years in misery trying to push away unpleasant. When you fully experience something and let it be, there's not suffering. It is the pushing away that's causing the suffering, not the annoying coworker. She is not causing your suffering. You not wanting her to be doing what she's doing is causing your suffering. So when she's tapping you and wanting to talk to you, what would it be like to give 50% of your attention to her and keep 50% of your attention in your body? And to keep a sense of mindfulness with you as your friend, and hold the space for your own unpleasantness while you're listening to her. Try it. Yeah.
I remind myself of opening the window.
Yeah.
Because you need to open a window, and until you get over the unpleasantness, you have no idea where the window is. You have no idea what to do with her until you fully accept her unpleasantness. And then and believe me, somehow we're weird from inside. You'll know what to do, and you'll do it. But as long as you're reacting to the unpleasantness, you'll never get there. You'll never get there. Yeah. Like she said, the window. She wasn't angry with the instant. She wasn't saying, it's my rules, my thing, blah, blah, blah. She just did what came, which was open the window and then tell her that you don't like it. There's a way to say no to a situation without the sense of accomplishment. Because if you there's a sense when you solve your problem, you say, well, I finally did it. And that's bullshit, right? Right on the spot. You can be sure that you solve your problem and you have that feeling of accomplishment. You'll be back with you
Right.
in a slammer. I like that window, that you just know what to do when you stop acting. The window thing is very important.
And even if you've accomplished it, even if you managed to get her to stop doing it, you haven't learned anything. You haven't become more skillful in how to manage your own suffering. And I like what you said for many reasons, but it's a good reminder to add that another reason why we want to be aware of unpleasant or pleasant and the subsequent wanting or not wanting, liking or not liking, is because we generally don't want to act out of a place of aversion. Aversion being, I don't want. So it's really great, Andy, that you're not saying anything to her because you're still in a place of aversion. And until you can come at it from a place of kindness, you're not going to get anywhere. At the moment when you feel like he said, you know, I'm okay with this. I can accept that this is who she is. And then you might still say to her, you know what? Whatever. But it's not coming from a need to stop it, and it's not coming from a making her wrong, and it's not coming from a pushing her away, and it'll be more skillful and more effective. You can say it with kindness. You can see the suffering that she's feeling, and you might even be so okay with it at that point that the only motivation you have to say something is to help relieve her of her suffering. Because ultimately you're in charge of relieving you of your suffering and she's in charge of relieving her. But sometimes as friends we can point things out to each other and give a little helpful hand. You know, but stay in your body. Feel your own not wanting. And be compassionate toward yourself. Don't make yourself wrong for not wanting. Don't take, oh, well, Susan said I should just be feeling the not wanting and I shouldn't be not wanting. No. The not wanting isn't wrong. There's something unpleasant. You want to be comfortable. You want to have a peaceful working environment. Not wanting arises. Feel it and make it your friend. This is what I can do for myself. I can't do anything about her, but what I can do is I can show up in a kind and loving and compassionate way for my own not wanting. So I wanted to close with a story that a lot of you have probably heard, but I love it, and it bears repeating. And I think it speaks to why we do this, of how the recognition and the awareness that we bring to our experience is either cultivating seeds of wholesome action and wholesome thought and wholesome view, goodness, if you will, or cultivating suffering, cultivating ill will, cultivating anger, right? It's how we look at our experience that determines whether we're suffering or not. So, an elderly Cherokee was teaching his grandchildren about life. He said to them, "A fight is going on inside me. It is a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. One wolf is evil. He is fear, anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, competition, superiority, and ego. The other wolf is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, sharing, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, friendship, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. This same fight is going on inside you too, and inside every other person." They thought about it for a minute, and then one child asked his grandfather, "Which wolf will win?" The old Cherokee simply replied, the one you feed.